Welcome back to Troubled, a podcast by survivors of institutional abuse, for survivors, the general public, parents considering residential programs of behavioral modification or therapeutic boarding schools for their kids. This time, Meredith and I are going to be doing solo episodes. For myself, I am actually taking some inspiration from the AA format that we used at the school. For those of you familiar with AA or in programs that were based on AA, there are 12 steps that you follow, and at one point, you actually share your story with the community. So I thought it would be kind of ironic, and actually I think a correct use of the word, to use that as my format for my solo episode to give you a little background on me and my personal experience. So in that vein, here we go. My name is Miranda Sullivan, and I am not an alcoholic, but I do get to deal with other addictions to fear-based false gods, as expressed through my pretty complex PTSD disorder. A great extent of that correlates to my experience in the troubled teen industry, of which I spent less than a year at the Family Foundation School in Hancock, New York, which is derived from Synanon, a cult that has been closed by the FBI by the 90s. I was at the family school in the early 2000s. I don't blame my entire experience with complex PTSD on the family school, although I don't believe that it would be affecting my life in the way it is, or that I would have a complex if I hadn't been through such an extreme reprogramming and brainwashing, totally surreal experiment like the family school. So it's a very significant aspect of my experience in informing who I am today, especially as I deal with the symptoms and the what do you want to call it, manifestations, I guess, of CPTSD. Especially because I personally believe that CPTSD is rampant in American society today. Obviously not specifically because of surviving institutional abuse, within rehabs, within the foster care system, these programs that we primarily touch on because that's our personal experience, orphanages, mental hospitals, all that jazz. There's also from sexual assault. PTSD obviously is going to tie into this with wartime experience or violence, especially at home, extreme poverty. If you look at the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experience quiz, and you see how many Americans are scoring far too high on that, and how we have already scientifically correlated it with long-term and lifelong immunodeficiency disorders, illnesses, proclivities to heart issues. Just Google it, look it up. I'm not a sciencey kind of based person. I'm definitely not going to debate that, but the science is out there. They've been studying this since at least the 90s. And I remember taking the ACE this summer when I really hit realization that I had complex PTSD and I needed to deal with it. Even though I'd been previously diagnosed, I disregarded all of my previous diagnoses because they were in my youth, and I felt completely misunderstood and misdiagnosed at the time, and I do think some of them were. But the CPTSD is something that, with my current knowledge, which isn't a lot, I definitely can accept that about my experience. But I scored relatively high. I believe it was an 18 out of 20, I think is the ACE. And I thought that that was kind of standard for the world that we all grew up in. And for especially 90s homes, a lot of the kids being raised by the baby boomers, those of us born in the mid to late 80s. But then a friend of mine, I had her take it as well, and that was not her experience. I don't even think she got a 5. It was really low. Blew my mind that she could grow up in a home where her parents weren't fighting and they weren't, verbally abusing her, calling her names, and there wasn't real use of corporal punishment at all. No wooden spoons, breaking on their bums, running around the house trying to escape mommy or daddy. And So that was really weird, because I thought that we can all relate on that level. So I think it's an issue that we really need to have more of a conversation about collectively. And so instead of my alcoholism, let's talk about the complex PTSDism, because I don't have alcoholism. I don't identify as an alcoholic. I was raised by one who was raised by one, and that kind of goes backwards since we got to America, which makes a lot of sense if you really like into all that jazz. I'm Irish and Sicilian, like third generation, so we're having a lot of fun with the alcoholism. So growing up in those homes, I didn't think that someone who always had a drink in their hand meant they were an alcoholic, and it wasn't really until writing the letter to the VA for my father's PTSD disability a few years ago as an adult that I really realized how abnormal my home life was, and how drastically it had been affected by growing up with a parent with an undiagnosed mental health disorder who was self-medicating with alcohol. And the fun parts about that, and I'm sure some of you can relate if some of you listening grew up in similar households. My dad's a Vietnam veteran. He joined the Corps when he was 17 years old after his father died, which was a pretty tragic experience for his family. And his mother was a full-blown alcoholic. So he was able to get her to sign the papers, went to Vietnam when he was 17. And in the 90s, PTSD wasn't really a thing. So my dad didn't start getting psychological help through the VA until I was pretty much out of the house. I moved out when I was 16. So it was, it was an experience. But the fun part of this, I think, for my mom is that I blamed her for everything. I thought my dad was a really fun, loving kind of a guy. He was always joking, always high energy, and she didn't appreciate his sense of humor. Why would you marry this really fun dude if you're just always bitching at him and you guys are always fighting? And I really felt like it was mostly her fault. And so my dad, I'm a total daddy's girl. Like, my dad is my hero still. And now I'm just finally starting to appreciate my mother's perspective, having to hold it all together in that. And my parents both being raised by alcoholics who were verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive, with one of my grandparents being accused by his foster daughter, multiple foster children being sexually abusive as well, is that they genuinely, I believe this as an adult now, but didn't understand it as a child, did much better than their parents. And that was obviously really deliberate. And so I can recognize that and appreciate that for them. And I can't imagine growing up in the households that my parents grew up in. But growing up in mine, I never had, I'm not trying to bitch here, you guys, but if you study this kind of psychology, not having your emotional needs met as a child, being chronically misunderstood, and experiencing being like an outsider in society from a very young age definitely has some long-term effects on the way we function, and how we express our personalities and how we interact with the outside world. So I had that, my relationship with my mother, to like even my most early memories, was a really complex relationship. Psychologically totally makes sense. It was a very adversarial relationship, and that was mutual for sure. And a big reason of why it didn't work out, especially once I hit my teenage ages. And my parents were super into corporal punishment, as everyone I assumed was in the 90s. This is an Irish Sicilian Catholic household, definite wooden spoon jazz, definite, like, dad, in my opinion, taking it too far, especially because of the PTSD. There were a lot of times where, who I was dealing with was not my actual father, and you'd look in their eyes and there's not that person there, and it's definitely, it would be mutually validated when he would, like, stop himself and start apologizing and back off, which was a really hard thing. That was the hardest thing for me, to see my dad so shaken by himself. But also I used that against him in a genuine way, you guys, by, turning around and staring him dead in the eyes and being like, God didn't give me to you for this. This isn't how he expects you to treat me, and stuff like that, which I genuinely believed. So this wasn't, in my case, a manipulation. But for survival skills and coping skills, I definitely was a really big liar. I'm told that as early as kindergarten, with the nuns going into St. Joseph's. I told them that I played all these instruments that obviously I didn't play. I was constantly in trouble for lying. I was obviously put on Ritalin at a really young age because I didn't fit the mold of that Catholic school world. Couldn't sit still, couldn't focus, super bored. Definitely want to talk to everyone in the class. I didn't have a real concept of like appropriate social behavior. So I was just too much for everyone, including my peers. And so never really could get along with the social dynamics of female hierarchy. And so I was like a typical 90s tomboy, hanging out with the boys at school, proving myself to them, super, super proud that I wouldn't wince or tattle, when they kicked the soccer rock at my shins, have those awesome moments of like, they stare at you with absolute fear. Oh my God, is she going to tell? Are we like never going to be able to like kick a rock around in the parking lot that is our playground again? But no, totally cool with it. I'm totally cool. So we're about 10 minutes in, and I am talking about how super cool I am with a lack of pain in the face of brotherly acceptance. But I don't want to spend too much time on my background. I just wanted to kind of lay some stuff out. So this is where we're at. We're at around 10, 11. This is when I move for the first time that I can remember. I leave Catholic school. This is when I first go to public school in Cheshire, Connecticut, which is very fancy compared to my lower middle class suburban experience in Meriden, Connecticut up until then, with kids that I've grown up with, some of them since Montessori. And now I am in public school with a bunch of, preppy, waspy kids that I can't relate to at all and don't fit into their society. And so this is where it gets really fun. Also, I mentioned earlier that I didn't have an emotional support person in my life in my younger years, but that wasn't exactly true. I did have my godmother, my mother's sister, but unfortunately that was a really complicated thing, this whole family ancestral karma and patterns and cycles and jazz. My sister and I, hopefully, and I do believe, have broken a 3-generation at least cycle of sisters not being on speaking terms until they die, literally. The first time that I saw my great aunt Connie speak to my grandmother was in a coma. She came out of it for a moment, but by the time that I had gotten them back into the room, she was asleep again, and never woke up after that. But I do believe was aware that her sister was there to make peace at the end of their lives. My mother and her sister were equally set up to continue this super not healthy, toxic relationship, and it worked. My grandfather and the family unit pitted them against each other since my mother was born, with her being the perfect blonde-haired, blue-eyed principessa, and my Aunt Narda being blamed for everything and taking the brunt of everything. And so when this was repeated in my generation, this is when it's just really fun. There's kind of sides. My aunt, to a great extent, defends, protects, and shields me from this by being this one person in my world who, even if she can't understand me, I do believe, at least from my perspective, accepted me. And so it created this safe space. So we're very, very close. We're spending lots of weekends and ski trips in her home in Vermont together. Part of the sickness of it is that since I don't accept my own mother as my mother, I'm kind of creating this maternal bond with my aunt, which obviously in turn is stoking my mother's fire, right? But, when I'm around 11, my grandmother dies. We move to Cheshire to live in a condo near my grandfather. And shortly thereafter, my aunt, in going in tote with this family cycle, disowned us, which, for our family was at this point and what I grew up in, totally normal, totally abnormal and out of my potential concept of reality that the most important person in my life would do this, especially at such a young age. I didn't understand how it could even be happening, or how it was justified. But this is something that was happening pretty regularly in my family. There were a lot of people that didn't speak to a lot of people, and that was really normal. What wasn't normal was having family holidays where you have like your old godmother, aunt, best friend, literally not gaslight, but put me on blackout, which is something I don't experience till the family school. But ultimately that's what it is, you're an 11-year-old going up to your godmother, trying to talk to her, and she's quite literally pretending that you don't exist, like she can't hear you, and yada yada. And then your entire family, extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone is there, and everyone just watches it happen. Which, I'm not blaming anyone for this. Like, I psychologically understand where all of this came from. I'm at a place now, I'm 33 years old, where all I want to do is bless these people and understand their own suffering and their own human experience and why they do what they do. And that's very much where I am at my journey. I don't harbor any resentment. But, these are just aspects of why, especially with complex PTSD being a relational disorder, this is kind of why I'm there. So shortly after this time, so my whole life I've been journaling. I'm a writer. I used to write like little tiny books for kids at school for quarters so I could buy penny candy after school and jazz like that. So I wrote a paper, and I believe it was 7th grade. It was my assignment. I'd gotten lost on the way home from walking home from school in the woods for hours. These were woods I just genuinely didn't know. I shouldn't have gotten that deep into them. I'm new in town, right? So, newish at this point. I've been there a couple years. So lost in the woods for hours. This is where I come up with the idea for my paper. When I get home, I have to write my essay really quick. So I basically liken squirrels jumping through the dead leaves like Jack the Ripper stalking you, right? Now, for the record, I know about Jack the Ripper because of my parents, right? So that's not my fault. We're not living in a world where I don't even have internet access, right? So it's not like I'm learning this on my own. These are influences that my parents are agreeing to put into my world. But Cheshire Public Schools was very uncomfortable with this essay. And so this is when I start therapy. This is also when I have my first IQ test. And this is also, to my knowledge, when we start pivoting me from, being a normal kid who's potentially has high expectations but is on Ritalin to help her succeed better, to it being more classified as a disability. My mother was really trying to get me labeled as special ed and special needs, as so that I could have access to little tools like being able to go to my locker at any time because I forgot a book, yada yada. At least that's how it's explained to me. Obviously, I'm rejecting most of these special needs, special ed, assistance, if you will, because I'm totally uncomfortable with it. But that's what we're doing. This is also the time period where the black lipstick comes out, right? I finally have a group of friends. Maybe they're from the wrong side of the track, but at least they don't judge me, right? And it's a little bit easier for me to navigate the wild and weird freaks, as we called ourselves back in late 1999, early 2000. So middle school is actually a really big game changer for me. I'm learning most of my social skills at this point there, but I'm also in highest speed rebellion. I no longer have anyone who understands me. I go through 3 or 4 therapists before I find the one that I'll stay with for most of my middle school and high school experience, who is absolutely fantastic. And this is why we need mental health professionals that really can understand and work with kids, because I put up a fight. I think there was probably a month, maybe. I'm an over-exaggerator, so it's probably one time that I just straight up refused to participate. But, Joy, she worked with me and, probably totally changed and saved my life. A lot of the coping skills that I learned and other ways to look at things were from those early years. And so naturally learned coping skills, which tie into the CPTSD. I'm a survivor. I've learned to be stoic in the face of high passion, hostile attack. I've learned that if I panic, if I show fear, if I show any sort of emotion, it just makes it worse. So I've learned to disassociate. I've learned to disassociate pretty effectively by the time I'm 10, 11 years old. I actually, journaling in 2000, literally journal from a 2-party perspective. It's very parts therapy, very self-abandonment, where I have this variation of myself. Maybe I'll pull out those journals someday and share it with all. But where it's I have to kill Miranda because she's too sensitive, she's too empathetic, she's always suffering with the suffering of the world, and we won't make it. And so I'm going to kill her to protect her. and this stronger version of me is going to burn this world down, is kind of the experience. I'm also very typical of like the old school style, like Zen meditations, right? I still to this day walk in circles. It's a constant thing. I'm sitting in the woods trying to imagine not existing. So my social life up until middle school is spent totally in solitude for the most part, grounded for the most part, in the woods. Pretty much now what I understand is meditating, or I guess imagining, but then it was just my imagination. I would just sit in the woods and completely imagine a new world, and that would be my experience. So with the middle school jazz, we're prepping to get to Mercy, which was always the goal, the all-girl Catholic school that I was groomed for, because my parents' parenting structure was very much a grooming, It wasn't about what I was interested in. In fact, if I was interested in something, usually it was mocked and derided until I gave it up. Example, my dad's an artist, my grandfather's an artist. I'm from a family of artists. And so around middle school, early high school, I start really focusing on drawing portraits, but with only one eye, because I really can't make two eyes match up. So I'm drawing a lot of Lauren Bacall's and Jessica Rabbit kind of style jazz. But my mother and father lovingly refer to these as my one-eyed monsters, right? And can't you draw anything else? And blah, blah, blah. They're so ugly and kind of horrific and ghoulish, which they were not, but they are now. The one-eyed monsters I make now are just completely monstrous. But I gave it up. I stopped doing visual artwork, even though I was naturally gifted with it. But not. And it's fun because I'm both at this time like a total rebel against the opposition. I'm labeled oppositional defiance disorder at this point. But let's just roll it back. Like, I'm not violent, other than with my sister and one time with my mother where she gave me permission to hit her. In a parking lot with a shopping cart. It was a lot of fun. So I'm not that way. I don't sneak out. I'm not using any drugs. I'm not having sex. I'm not skipping school. So it's nothing like this. It's just I don't feel like I'm being allowed to be me. And so at 12 to 13 to 14 years old, the priority in my life is to break through and express myself. And so as you can imagine, with an environment where it's supposed to be all very tied up with a pretty bow and very Connecticut conservative, Catholic life, which I am too, because I'm an altar server and my faith is incredibly strong. When I'm younger, I call that Catholicism, but I actually read the Bible, right? And so I had a lot of questions for the priests by middle school, like right before middle school, and they either couldn't answer them for me or they flat out denied my interpretation. And these were on some pretty obvious things. We're talking, I had questions like, wait, in Matthew and Luke, and I think it's in 3 of them, when they say, Jesus, your mother, brothers and sisters are at the gate, and he does, well, who are my brothers and sisters but you under God? I think that's a pretty clear statement that Jesus has mothers, he has a mother, has brothers and sisters, right? I'm not really sure how I misinterpreted that, but they went with, I just completely misunderstood. And then when I was 12, Job just threw me for a loop, y'all. For anyone who's read Job, you know what I mean. It's pretty freaking intense. And I took it as God lets Satan torture people and do whatever the hell he wants because God's a psycho. Like, I didn't understand it. Now, at my spiritual level, and, my expression right now, Job is probably maybe my favorite Old Testament book. It is actually the opposite of everything I thought it was, and it's not just this really weird masochistic God tortures man shit. So if those conversations had been allowed with my priests when I was younger, I've had awesome conversations about both of those topics with Capuchin and Franciscan monks since then, but at the time, that was just, not a thing. So, I'm veering off. I'm studying different spiritualities. I think it's pretty relatable as far as who I was at that time. I do wind up going to Mercy, the all-girl Catholic school, until my junior year. So, I did choir. I am actually not an extrovert at this point, but, you know, with the energy levels then I was volunteering 3 to 4 days a week with school extracurricular programs. I was the Amnesty International rep. I did Justice and Peace. I did MyArc 2 days a week. I did the convalescent home, right? All that jazz. I was in drama club. I'm basically signing up for everything I possibly can that I don't literally loathe to avoid being home, because my home life is incredibly unsafe. So I can have a totally different experience about my day, and then as soon as I get home, now it's bad. Like, there's no way to avoid it degrading into a full-blown family argument, which is usually my fault. You know, the same time period that my parents have always been pretty at each other's throat. By middle school, my mother starts to blame their potential divorce on me. Excuse me, need more coffee? And so, you know, and again, my coping mechanisms and survival skills are so good at this point that I really do understand that it doesn't have anything to do with me, and that these are just projections, right? But this is how the home life is. They're using different raising tactics for myself and my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, and there's a ton of sibling rivalry, and we are deliberately pitted against each other by my grandfather so that he can continue what happened with his daughters. So it's a lot of, like, twisted, weird shit. So high school, super busy. I have really good friends in high school. I had all my freak weirdo friends in middle school who were epic, and I love you guys. But in high school, I'm hanging out with the musical theater nerds. I'm not hanging out with, I think I'm probably the worst influence with my high school group of friends at Mercy. So there's really nothing to worry about where Miranda's going, but it's just the constant negativity and hostility at home. And so eventually what ends up happening when I'm 16 in my junior year, I'm still in therapy. I still have the same therapist. I'm not sure when I switch over to my second therapist, who is a gentleman. I think I only had him for about a year or two before I get sent to the family school. And after that, I don't have therapists until current day today. So, I don't know where I was. I'm just trying to be faster, but, like, not too fast, because everyone's always like, you talk too fast. So, this is all going on, and I am, you know, I think that a lot of this stuff is my parents deliberately isolating me, like, sending people to pick me up from school dances because I was grounded. But it's like, I need to, like, be involved with my community to be invested in it. Whatever. So I'm a teenage girl. I am really high imagination, high passion, high empathy. I'm a very emotional being. And I think I'm still being drugged. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm still being drugged or if I'm getting off it from the Ritalin, which is a big dark smog about my childhood, and as an adult, I really do think had a lot to do with emotionally and chemically throwing me off balance. I had my first suicide attempt shortly after moving to Cheshire, so I was probably 12, 13, I was in middle school, and I swallowed a couple bottles of multivitamins, and then, you know, very dramatically, Ophelia-esque, went to bed and woke up fine, I don't know how many hours later. But when I'm 16, there's a lot of intensity going on, and so I just genuinely just cannot do it anymore. I have nowhere to escape. I have no outlet, nobody to talk to, and everyone in my home is my enemy. So I do overdose on Tylenol when I'm 16 years old. I, you know, wrote everything I felt in Sharpie on the walls of my room as I'm slowly falling into myself. I do become slightly conscious hours later as my mother is dealing with me. And, you know, at this point still, I'm obviously, I think it's obvious, overdosing. And she's got me by my hair with my face in the mirror, asking me if I'm proud of myself and look what I've done kind of jazz. My sister wakes up, thank God, because of me. I think I was seizing against the toilet and stuff. All the commotion eventually woke up my sister, and as soon as my sister opened that door, it went from, you know, look what you've done, to let's get in the car and go to the hospital. And getting your stomach pumped is one of the most horrifying experiences physically ever. And I believe I was put in a short-term coma And, obviously I'm still alive, guys. But at this point, I get to opt. I think I had a choice to a certain extent, but I do go to the psych ward. I'm not sure if it's this time directly right after I get better. I think it is. And I end up getting a DCF worker, like a social worker, to pay attention to my case and keep track of it or whatnot. And then over the course of the next year, my parents start to allow me to spend prolonged periods of time at my best friend Paul. Remember, I hang out with guys. His house. His mother was totally down. They even took me to Christmas in, I think, New Hampshire to visit their family because my parents didn't want me around for Christmas and jazz like that. I think, but I've never asked my parents any questions about any of this, I think my parents at this point are already in a tough love group. I kind of think the simplest way would have been that once I was in the, psych ward, gone through the hospital system, and they'd gotten connected to resources for parents, that they may have given them the option or introduced them to tough love. I don't know. I have no idea when the tough love jazz started. So, but I do believe that it was tough love being like, no, let her go, stay with these guys. So I'm spending a lot of time with Paul and his family, weeks at a time, weekends at a time, regularly. And eventually what ends up happening is my parents come home from tough love and very, briskly tell me, so we've decided that it's best if you go live with Paul and Cindy. And I think we called her, and she was down with it, and I was packed and out of the house immediately. Immediately. It was probably less than an hour. I think I'd already been partially packed anyways. I'm not sure if they thought I was actually going to do it. I'm not really sure what the strategy was around that. But with my parents' blessing and them asking Cindy to take me on as, some sort of custodial guardianship, I moved out. And this is either this late spring, early summer of my 16th to 17th year. My birthday is at the end of April. And I think I moved out when I was 16, but it's very possible that this was right after my birthday. I'm not sure. Again, I still think I was 16 because I always say that. So maybe that's true, but maybe that's not how truth works. So this is when shit gets real. So I'm continuing to go to my public high school, even though I am now living with my friend. We are not living in the public city limits that my high school was in. My parents still live there. They're still claiming me on their income taxes. But the first week of senior year in high school, my mother goes to the high school and withdraws me from high school. And this is how messed up our system is, you guys. I can sign myself out, or at the time, because I'm hoping it's changed, but in 2003, I was legally allowed to sign myself out of high school by 16 years old, but I was not allowed to sign myself into high school until I was 18 years old. So both of these conditions were pending parental approval. So my mother was legally allowed to sign me out of high school, which I found out when I came back to school the next day after this had happened. And then I had to sit in the principal's office every single day. I was not even allowed to attend my courses while this was being sorted out because I literally wasn't enrolled at the school. So I had to sit in the principal's office so that I wouldn't be truant if at the end of the day they allowed me to continue going to school there. But I don't have access to any of my classes. So it's just, if you've ever had to sit in school suspension, or, God forbid, you've actually been in an isolation room, which is way worse than this, it's pretty horrible to have to sit there for 8 hours a day doing absolutely nothing, just reading books. So that's what was going on. So at one point, my parents, who I'd had zero contact with since I moved out, I don't recall. No, I did. Okay, fine. Really quick. The contact I did have with my parents was that there was one night or afternoon that I get a call, Cindy gets a call from my dad. I don't have a cell phone, right? And my dad tells me that him and my mother are getting a divorce, and that he's getting an apartment, and I'm going to come live with him. And he told me that he'd be there in X amount of hours to pick me up, and so to have all my stuff ready. So just to, it's, after everything, I am still thrilled to hear this. So I pack up all my stuff, and I put it up on her little wall, and I sit there, you know, typical, like, kicking your legs into the, like, with the sun setting behind you on the lake, waiting for my daddy to show up. But my dad never shows up. And I never, ever hear from my father again until my parents organize this sit-down meeting with the two of them and their tough love counselor, who I was led to believe was some sort of professional in, I don't know, psychology or education. I don't know what I thought about the situation. And they told me that the reason they withdrew me from school was because they were afraid for my physical safety because of my suicidality and my depression, which, for the record, at this point is not being expressed. I am, again, highly socially involved for the first time in my life, totally socially involved. I have a boyfriend who's actually a really, really good person. My friends are not, again, I'm still probably the worst influence that my friends have. I'm not skipping school. I am not doing drugs, you know, none of this jazz. So I'm not really sure what they're concerned about. But that's kind of the crux of it, right? They're like, we would appreciate if you would go do a 28-day evaluation, at this psych place, and if they say you're good, then we will sign educational guardianship over to Cindy so that you can go back to school, and so that, you know, legally she can make all these decisions for you, and we can work on a relationship. So I'm, like, not really down. I don't trust my parents. I've never trusted my parents. They're completely dangerous to me. So I told my therapist about it, and he's like, I have to go on vacation for a week. He's like, don't you dare go anywhere with your parents until I get back. He's like, if this offer is legit, then they'll honor the offer in a week. However, my parents, per, you know, the way this stuff works, are like, no, you have 24 hours to decide. So within those 24 hours, of course, my boyfriend and I got into, like, a fight. I feel like he didn't give me enough attention, and so I may or may not have, like, just broken up with him to make him cry. And he didn't show up that night at my window crying for me or something like that. That's what happened. And so then I decided, oh my God, you guys, you know what? I can teach him a motherfucking lesson. I'm going to go away for 28 days. He's going to miss me so much that he's really going to appreciate me when I'm back. And for the record, this was, like, the healthiest relationship that I've ever had. I'm still playing games because I'm raised in a narcissistic codependent household, but he's a really good guy. To this day, I love him. He's a really great guy. I'm so grateful that of all the human beings in the world, that the first person that I chose to be intimate emotionally and physically with is this human being, because he is just as beautiful as I remember him. He really just is a good, amazing person. Hopefully, once I work my shit out, I'll be capable of having a fuck with you relationship with someone equally as supportive and beautiful as a soul as he is. So yeah, so my parents aren't having anything about it. I'm going to teach my boyfriend a lesson. And so I call my parents in the middle of the night and I hop in the car, or I plan to get in the car first thing in the morning. I'm really not sure if I even told who I told that my parents were picking me up. I don't know. I really did believe it was just going to be 28 days. And they took me to this place, Dobbs Ferry in upstate New York, and as soon as we crossed state lines, the laws totally changed. And at 16, I no longer had the right to sign myself out of anything. And now I had to be 18, but I'm 17. I'm not 18 yet. So I lose any sort of freedom for the next almost a year. So at this point, I'm checked into Dobbs Ferry Children's Village for my evaluation. And I don't want to spend really much time on Dobbs Ferry. Perhaps it would be more significant if it weren't overshadowed by the family school, which is where I am referred to. I'm referred to the Family Foundation School for long-term institutionalized residential treatment because during my 20-something day evaluation at Dobbs Ferry, I had shown that I was very successful and very stable in a structured residential institutionalized environment, because based on my parents' statements about what my life was like prior, clearly this 28 days was very beneficial for me, and the only way for prolonged success would be to keep me institutionalized. I was shown a cursory brochure of the family school. I was given another IQ test, and I guess the most significant memory for me about my experience there was that they did allow me, someone allowed me, I don't remember who, to hop on a phone real quick and call my boyfriend at the time, you know, which was obviously the most important thing in my 17-year-old life, was to let him know that I wasn't coming home, and, you know, obviously we were going to wait for each other. And so I would then use this relationship to kind of keep me motivated and sane throughout the next part of my experience. The girls that I met in the crisis intervention part of Dobbs Ferry, we were in like that preliminary evaluation area, not the long-term residential placement. Really, this is when the kinds of peers that I'm surrounded by changes, and this will change for the rest of my life. I will no longer feel comfortable around super normal, Catholic, Connecticut, upstanding citizen kind of people. Instead, now, I'm only going to, after this whole experience, I'm really only going to be able to relate to people who've been smashed to pieces and put themselves back together, because looking through, you know, a standard plain glass plane is just super boring compared to the mosaics of these kinds of people who I will come to relate to. But it really puts my whole life and self-pity shit in perspective to be confined with these other girls, most of which are younger than me. I think I may have been one of the older ones. A girl that was younger than me had a 2-year-old daughter from sexual assault. She'd been sexually trafficked out of the Bahamas. There was a 12-year-old who'd lived her entire life in foster care system. She had mental disabilities as a result of her mother being a drug addict when she had her. And these girls were beautiful and managed to find so much joy in such dark experiences and places. I mean, if you really want to talk about coping skills and disassociation and all this, I mean, these girls were magnificent. I don't understand how they had so much strength or whatever it was. But it really, really put it in perspective. They were dealing with real life shit. You know, these kids had been literally abandoned, literally trafficked. Most of them had been sexually assaulted. No one was coming from the situation where my parents and I didn't get along, and they just thought I was troubled because I wouldn't do what they wanted me to do. This was like some real life jazz for these girls, and it wasn't going to be okay for them. There was nobody rooting for most of them on the other side. I had a support system. Granted, they didn't know where I was, and I wouldn't have any contact with them until I turned 18. This is when my mind just starts to blow open. I was escorted in either the middle of the night or the early morning. It was still dark, by 2 large gentlemen, one which I believe I recognized as my parents' tough love counselor. And one of, if not both of my parents were also in the car, and we drove upstate to Hancock, New York, out into the Catskill Mountains, and that's where I get to the next stage and one of the most significant experiences of my life. At this point, for me, I had nothing left to say to my parents. I begged my father, so my father was there. I begged my father not to leave me here, that he knew that this was a mistake, and probably told them I wasn't going to forgive them ever. And they were dead to me. I'm not sure. Whatever. They brought me into the female locker room where a couple other students about my age who were a little bit more senior, had been there for a while, and were a little bit more calm and comfortable with their environment, or at least they could appear that way, helped me to unpack with the staff present. They took pretty much everything, my journals. I had, this is the kind of kid I am, right? Like I have like a dried leaf with a blessing on it from a time that whatever. And I've always kept that. And yeah, they took that away. They took everything away that was part of your identity from your former life. And the only thing of contraband that I snuck in, which that's a fun story in and of itself when that finally comes out at the school, but it was my boyfriend's shirt. So I actually managed to sneak in my boyfriend's shirt, which smelled like him. You guys, come on, I'm 17. And I would end up sleeping with this for the next most of the months that I'm there as a real security blanket. It does smell like him the entire time, by the way, so that was pretty awesome. Yeah, anyways, so this is kind of when you're being debriefed, intaked. A really fun part of this, and if we finish any narrative version of this, I'm not sure at what point I want any of this information to come out, but one of the girls that was debriefing me, her father was actually my parents' tough love counselor. So this is actually the way these places work. There were multiple kids at this one school that were from the same tough love circle. And this is probably because parents would get discounts on their highly expensive, we're talking, I think the family foundation school when I was there was $40,000 a year. So they would get a discount for the more kids that they referred there that ended up going. And so I had no idea. I did not find this information out until after I left the school. But this girl, that was a situation. So intake is very surreal. It's this point where you are forced to accept the reality of your circumstances. Your parents have left. You, at least for me, I'm constantly, multiple times throughout the next couple weeks, actually, demanding to speak with Child Protective Services or the police, and, letting them know I have a right to contact CPS, or at least that's what I believed. I'm not even sure if that was true back then, because it's not necessarily true in most of these programs now. And so you're trying to get in contact with someone who can let them know what's really going on. They're telling me that I'm going to be here until I finish my program, or as I would soon find, or until you turn 18 if you should decide to walk. Otherwise, there's no way out. And for me, I'm very open with, well, I'm 17, I'm going to be 18 in a few months, so obviously I'm just going to walk then. What's the point of all this just for a few months? And so their big motivator with me, which is brought in at some point during intake, is that this whole 18 months, 18 years where all of a sudden you're an adult and you have rights, may be true unless you get mandated to the program until completion. So this threat of mandation for me is going to wind up being the most powerful tool the school has against me. So there are a lot of reasons, like people who have not been in these experiences will be like, well, why didn't you run away? Firstly, there were a lot of people who did run away. Most of them came back. Most of the ones that are relevant in my experience, I'm total witness syndrome, I'm total, from a writer perspective, right? I'm looking at everybody's perspective and watching their stories unfold. And I'm usually like a very narrator experience in life. So I am the least abused at the family foundation school from when I was there. I wholeheartedly believe that. And a lot of the people who were significant for my story, when they came back after running away, they were not themselves anymore. Horrific things happened to kids who ran away. And it was almost more scary if they weren't returned because you didn't know what happened to them. But this will be something, that we start to see happen. So I didn't run away, and I'm not throwing a fit or staging any large protests initially at this point, because initially I'm still thinking I can talk to CPS. Like at some point they're going to check in with me, and this is going to get reviewed very quickly in the first few days. It's not a big deal. So I'm intaked by these girls. They then are taking me, my family, so the school, the Family Foundation School, which is a Synanon-based school. Synanon is the cult that was closed by the FBI after they tried to assassinate attorney Paul Moretz by putting a poisonous snake in his mailbox. They were closed down in the 90s. But Synanon had a New York location, Eastridge, and the Argyros family who raised their kids, I think, pretty much in Eastridge, decided to make the family school in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe, while Synanon was still functional and Eastridge was still functional. They bought another piece of property, I believe it's a separate piece of property, and started this program. And then when Synanon closed, the family school is still functional, right, because it's owned by the Argyroses. It's kind of a separate thing, but they're using the same jazz. And it is AA-based, or at least that's how they say to us. I've never actually been to AA outside of the family school, so I'm not sure if they use attack therapy, but I don't think they would. But we'll get into attack therapy. So the family school is family-based, and so you've got these adults who are family leaders. There's 2 parents in every family, and there's like 4 or 5 male and female adult staff per family, something like that. There's usually around 30 kids per family. Meredith says there are 8 families. I wanted to believe there are 10, but Meredith was there for 3+ years, so she knows better. So there's 8 families. I am in family 3 for the entirety of my stay. Family 3, the family leaders are Mike and Cindy Argyros. Mike is the successor of Tony and Betty Argyros, so he runs the school with his wife Cindy, and so we're kind of in the main family, the leader's family. But when I get there, family 3 is actually on some sort of field trip. So they're not there at all. So for my first weekend after being intaked, I am not in family 3. And instead, I go to another family, the family with this girl whose dad convinced my parents to send me there. And my temporary weekend sponsor is this beautiful, beautiful human being named Lisa. So Lisa is a junior sponsor. That means she has come pretty far in her program. I think she'd been there for a couple years at this point. I think by the time I learned more about her while she was still at the school, she'd already been there for 3. So it's really hard to imagine Lisa as a troubled teen because she's so compassionate and such a leader. Still, I've hung out with Lisa after the school, and she's just a diplomat, and she's a beautiful person, and that beauty is from the inside out, and it's on the outside too. So she's one of those beautiful people that is just really hard not to love, and I was so blessed to have her as this temporary guardian, I guess, peer guardian, but and it's called a junior sponsor. But the thing with these experiences that are really important, and we will have an entire episode with both Meredith and myself so we can get really into this, and I'll touch on a few in my story, but the light in the darkness is breathtaking, you guys. Like, and manifesting your own reality. I mean, the books that I read as a teenager, like, set this up. I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, Ordinary People, Will There Really Be a Morning? I was reading Orwell and Dostoevsky, very dystopic and existentialist jazz, and I loved the stories of brilliant, unique young women stuck in an institution until they find this beautiful dissociative acceptance of their situation. And so look at what's happening to me, so careful what you read, y'all. But Lisa intaking me that first weekend was a very gentle introduction. And I don't know how I would have responded had I immediately gone into family 3 with my junior sponsor, who I won't name because this isn't something that she likes to talk about in her personal life. So, but my real junior sponsor, my real family, if that had been my first initial experience, based on how I feel about myself, I'm pretty sure I would have wilded out. I'm really sure, because once I do go into my family, it is just, the culture shock is real. So Lisa's family was a little bit more of an intellectual family, was a little bit more of a, at least like more like my real family in real life, where at least from that weekend experience, it felt like they still wanted that face of intellectual superiority and control. Whereas my family was more into the attack therapy, primitive breakdown jazz. I'm not saying hers wasn't, and maybe she'll tell us sometime if she's comfortable with that, but it was different. And also, so after intake with your junior sponsor, they're walking you through the rules as much as you can like absorb at the time as they can. So there's a first, I don't know if it's the first 24 hours or whatnot, where you don't get outright punished for screwing up. It's 24 hours to 3 days, because you don't know all the rules. And there are so many rules that I promise you're still learning them for most of the first 6 months, at least 3 months. But certainly in the first 3 days, there's no way you could remember all the rules, right? So your junior sponsor is responsible for showing you the ropes and letting you know what's expected, and letting you know like how things work here. And this is your reality, and getting you to accept it. So, because usually your junior sponsor is going to be responsible for your progress in a certain amount of, there's a certain amount of responsibility there. They will be held accountable if their junior sponsee is like not progressing or yada yada. Just another way to get sibling rivalry going. But that wasn't the case with Lisa. And I think Lisa was also in taking her own junior sponsee, which is the only reason I was allowed to speak to her during that time. But not only did Lisa really consciously and deliberately try to like protect my psychological transition into this dystopic nightmare of a sci-fi novel that we were doing, but she also is the reason that I'm not part of the Me Too movement, and I do believe that. In part of her, like, what did you used to do at home? Like, you can do some of that stuff here, try to keep me from losing my shit. I told her, obviously, among other things, I've been in choir for years. It's something I do. And she very diplomatically, because this is Lisa, informed me that no, in fact, I no longer do choir. Lisa did choir, and I no longer did choir, and I don't know what she said to me, and she wasn't the only one, but she was the first and most firm about it, but she notified me that the choir teacher was a pedophile, and that I was no longer involved in choir. And because upon intake, or with my parents' intake, they'd been like, yeah, Miranda does choir. When I did get to my family, they did expect me to do choir. And I, with coaxing from, I don't know if it was from Lisa or one of the secondary people who informed me that no, I don't do choir anymore, I managed to manipulate the situation by telling the family leaders that, if I was really trying to be a new me, that anything related to my old image would be a negative influence. And so, maybe I should try something different from choir. And so that saves me from potentially becoming a target of a known child sexual predator. Perhaps my gratitude for Lisa for that one act, let alone just the whole appreciation for my sanity and the compassion that she showed me, which was some of the last compassion I would experience for at least a few more months. I don't know that I can verbalize it on this podcast. I don't think that I can get that across. Maybe in words, so that we could go through that journey on a kind of somatic visual. But even if I bawled my little heart out with all the feels that I feel for her, it doesn't get it across. And this is the thing about surviving something with someone. This is a sisterhood, and I mean, it's not a pretty one. Survivor fighting and survivor bullying is a real thing too, but even though we don't walk our paths outside of the programs together all the time, and we don't have the same political opinions or religious opinions, none of us do, right, you guys? There's still this sister acceptance, and this goes for my brothers too, because God, I love Colin and Matt so much, that it doesn't matter. I don't know how to put it. I guess it's the same thing when you survive war with someone. It doesn't matter who they are as this personality. You guys were real and really went through something that's surreal, beyond real. It is so raw and real that none of the rest of it matters. And especially for those people who in these insane moments reach through and are just totally real. And I just want to put it out there. If I had tattled on Lisa, if I had mentioned what she'd said to me to anyone, or any of the tones she'd used with me, she would have been severely, severely punished. So she took a huge risk. She put herself at risk to prevent this girl, this child that she didn't know and had nothing, there's no bond there, from becoming a target of a sexual predator, because that was the right thing to do. And she was already in like the red zone with this guy. So for her to put herself out there for me, she didn't know me. She didn't know what I was going to do with that information. I could have very easily just gone to someone else and been like, hey, Lisa said this. Is it true? And it would have been all over for her. And there are the bravery and the selfless fortitude and the self-sacrifice that I have personally witnessed children display in these environments that most adults couldn't even handle this. And I saw children reach out against like their own like instinctual survival to protect someone else, or to just be present for someone else because you couldn't save anyone, but you could sometimes, and again, always at great risk to yourself, be present for another individual. And it meant all the difference, because the social and psychological isolation of being mass gaslit and mass manipulated and having your behavior modified and you're brainwashed, and having another human reach through that like hallucination, that illusion through to you and be like, okay, you're not crazy. I'm not crazy. It's okay. And I mean, it's not okay. And I don't know if it'll be okay later, but this is real. And your perception of it is real. And sometimes eye contact during attack therapy was the most profound human connection I've still ever had in my life. It was just outside of this dimension, man. Whew, so, sorry guys, getting a little emotional, so I have to pause. So reality comes when Family 3 gets back and I get sent down to Family 3. And this stuff is just so much fun. I don't personally relate to my junior sponsor. She's a beautiful person. I have nothing negative to say about her, but we just don't, you can go through something and not relate to someone, and that is just the reality. And it's a dangerous relationship with your junior sponsor, as it is with your junior sponsee. You are required to proactively debrief adults on everything that the other one is doing. Well, at least top down, right? And my actual sponsor, the adult that's my sponsor, because again, we're using a lot of AA terminology. We are reading the big book and all that jazz. And I'm in the first wave of EA, but the EA didn't exist initially when I got there, and it starts to pop in a little after. My adult sponsor is, again, another light in the darkness. Thank you. Thank you, universe, for all of these beautiful, beautiful side support systems. Not saying that anybody proactively saved me or anything beautiful like that, other than Cindy, the woman I'd lived with before, and a psychologist we'll talk about later, who comes and visits me a couple times. But Tina, my sponsor, there's no other human, maybe Betty Rosengrant, but there's no other human at the family school that would have been a better sponsor for me. I was her first, so obviously she was really ramped up to expect me to be a complete manipulator, and so it takes a while for Tina to finally start believing my narrative of who I am, and that is fun. That gets fun. But so initially at the family school, you are shadowed 24/7 by your junior sponsor, and I do mean 24/7. You have to, if you're in the school when you pee, there are urinals with doors, but you have to leave the door open, and and then in the dorms, our toilet, the Family 3 girls dorm, the toilet was literally inside our shared closet. So you have one closet you share, and then you have, I think you put your like regular bag that you came with under your bed. That's all anybody really comes with, right? And then the dorm closet is shared clothes, especially for the girls who nothing was acceptable, or if you're on like poverty, where they make you wear like a bunch of standard sweats all the time. If you think you're pretty, they'll put you on poverty. No makeup, no accessories, hair in a bun, these really whatever sweats. So the toilet is in the closet. So it took me a while to poop. I think that that's something for a lot of people. I hear a lot of people say they have poop and food issues, which makes sense because this was like all the time kind of jazz. So we're sitting at our first meal, and I need someone to pass a condiment. Knowing me, it's probably ketchup. So I tap this dude to the right of me, and this dude ends up being a long-term part of my life story. And he freaks out. Like, you would have thought I'd stabbed him in the shoulder with a knife, you guys. But you're not supposed to touch boys. This is how I find that out. That one was good. You're initially on 6 months blackout. Blackout is you don't exist to me, no eye contact, no anything. Like, so it doesn't matter if you try to have a full-fledged conversation. I'm not going to eye contact. I'm not going to respond to you. And then I'm going to report you to my junior sponsor is how that's supposed to go. So you're on 6 months blackout when you first get there. That 6 months means anyone who hasn't been there over 6 months, you can't talk to, including usually your own family, although a lot of blackouts are off during, or certain sanctions are off during meals because you're having family topics. And so, yeah, it's just a lot of fun. The first time I get called up at a family topic that I remember, other than my probably initial intake topic, which Miranda's whole thing, and this is really fun how they use me, is like, you have to first step and admit why you're here. Because I refused to admit that I was an alcoholic, because I'd only been drunk, I think 2 times, prior to being at the family school, and they'd been years ago. And I wasn't a drug addict, and I wasn't a whore. They're really big on promiscuity. A lot of girls had been sexually assaulted, and that was pretty much their fault because we're, whatever, whores. And so my first topic, other than that initial "why are you here" thing, which will repeat my entire stay at the school, was the fun. This is fun, and I told myself I would be very careful how I put this. Okay, so there's this guy that I meet at my first meal, and he is really a really nice guy. I generally feel safer. I do feel safe around males, but I'm very comfortable with people who are different. And this guy seemed like he was very socially different, and so I felt safe with him. Like, I didn't feel like he was going to attempt to manipulate me. So yeah, I sought him out. I thought that he was a genuine, pure, safe person. And so we would sit near each other at meals. I don't even remember, if they were assigned seats, but I sat next to him quite often, and he was one of the main people I would talk to, because the others, oftentimes, especially with my thing, why is she here? They're trying to pull stuff out of you, and it's dangerous, and I just didn't feel like he was dangerous. So very soon into being at the school, he actually calls me up at a table topic to call me out for flirting with him and trying to pull him into a negative contract. And a negative contract is like, we agree to be negative together, and everything's negative. If your brother or sister's at the school, obviously, if you had any contact with them at all, it would be negative, so you're on blackout with your brother and sister, which I think is really insane and psychologically destructive, y'all. But anyways, this guy's pulling me up on, and I am just flabbergasted is a genuine description. I am like, no way, I have a boyfriend and I love him and I would never cheat on him. And I'm just trying basically to not be like, dude, I would never, no one believes this, right? That I would be into this dude, what's up? But they did, whatever. And so that was a fun table topic. I had a hard time accepting my being stuck there. I just still, I would waver between utilizing my coping skills of disassociation and survival, which thank you Dad and Mom for teaching me them, at a young age, because if I didn't have them, I don't think I would have been able to stay on my own side and survive in any level of sanity. Like, for a majority of the family school experience, while I may not have been able to hold my shit together, I was on my own side and I had my own back. And so I can't, if you don't understand how that kind of jazz, like your relationship with self works, I'm not sure if I can explain it, but like, if you've abandoned yourself, if you're not on your own side, then you're just totally lost. So that was like a really big part of it. But yeah. So I'm trying to get pretty much every adult that I can talk to privately, since I've been very public and vocal about this, to allow me to call 911. There is no access to phones. There is one phone in each family. It's used for the phone calls home, which I'm not sure how often you get those, if it's weekly or monthly, because I didn't get them. So the whole time I was there, I don't think I ever spoke to my parents on the phone. Maybe once, and it was maybe as brief as, "Are you going to take me out?" And they were like, "No." And I was like, "Goodbye." Would have probably been it. The thing with my first phone call, though, I think I was granted it. I don't know. There was a thing with my first phone call, because I do remember at one point sitting by the phone in the family. And this was the fun part, was like that I'm blamed for all the stress in my parents' life and potentially them possibly getting a divorce. And so by the time my first phone call comes up, it's not accessible because my parents had, I'll try not to be like flippant. Let's be an adult about the way we say this. My parents had enrolled me in the delightful boarding school and then pretty immediately gone on their first European vacation as a couple, and they went to Sicily. And so by the time I'm supposed to call my parents, I don't even get to talk to them because they're gallivanting around the world on a vacation while I am suffering through The Handmaid's Tale, separate from the, impregnation shit or black, whatever you're comfortable accepting. Although The Handmaid's Tale is like really on point, you guys. Like, that's really how these social, like, brainwashing experience things go. So basically I'm trying to get all of the adults to let me use a phone to call the police, or CPS. I'm trying to convince them that I don't belong here. That initially, I think it's really, and this is what they used. It's easy for me to assist you in painting me, especially at that time or in that situation, as someone with a superiority complex, because I didn't believe I needed to be there, and it was believable that this kind of environment would exist for kids who, were really defiant, especially because of the background that I'm coming from, where, like, just to clarify, like, at 33, I still believe that if my parents knew everything that went down at the family school, which they may, that they're still cool with it. This Christmas was the first time ever, and we're talking up to 15 years after, that we've had a Christmas dinner where my parents literally didn't be like, "I really wish you'd stayed at the family school because your life wouldn't be such a shit fest," kind of a thing. They don't say shit fest, that's like my word, but that kind of jazz. So my dad was at military school, and the homes that my parents came from and the way that they parented me, it made sense that this was an appropriate choice for someone to use on their child. And the way that they paint you guys to each other is this really exaggerated, blown up reality that for most of the kids there was not at all true. The family school especially, and now it has, people paint, at least with the boarding school aspect, that these are wealthy, children from wealthy homes that are spoiled and that may be pill popping sluts or, getting drunk, stealing dad's Ferrari and totaling it, which those kids were totally there. Like, I'm not saying they weren't there. I don't think that they were a majority. There was a really big part of the population that were genuinely there because a step-parent really didn't want to deal with the rebellion, or a lot of them were being raised by grandparents that couldn't deal with ADHD, video game addictions, talking back, stuff like that. And so they'd sent their kids to this place. And for a lot of those people, and also the kids that were sent by the court systems or through DCF or through their public school as a special ed case or whatnot, these programs were not paid for by the family itself. So I know that they're really expensive, and so that it's easy to assume, and especially because a lot of the people who've spoken out, you can look at me that way too, right? I grew up in suburban Connecticut, went to private school. I could fit that mold if you don't take into account that, like, my dad was a mechanic that was, like, never home as a union mechanic. And, my parents, like, built all of this for themselves, and we were still lower middle class. So, it was a pretty wide array of kids, that are going to the school. And, so, yeah, I forgot what my point was. We were talking about shit. I remember. Okay, so, my point was the way they paint you to yourselves. So, or to each other as well. So they're painting someone like me like, I'm too good to be here. I think everybody else is a drug addict or a slut or a social reject, and I need to have my arrogance. They were really big on me being arrogant and feeling superior, which, if you know me personally, is, maybe it's been part of my experience. I just have a really weird way of looking at the world. I've gone through stages where I didn't think anyone else really existed, and this was all a dream in my mind. So there's that stuff, and it's not true. And they were really good about, using the information they had on you, to, like, create a narrative that was believable for everybody else. But so they would do stuff like that with people like me, and then that's also how they used me against my peer group, because my peers would believe that about me. So they believed that I was judging them, and that I thought I was better than them, and I didn't think I needed to be there. And you got to understand, especially for some of these kids who'd been there for years and been beaten into this sense of, not a sense of, but actual surrender. Surrendering was the first step, right? Admit you have a problem and surrender. You have no power over yourself and all this other jazz. And so those kids had done that work, and they'd been through this, and how dare I just got here, and I don't think I need to be here, and I think they do. And from a very real level, it comes from a perspective of, I think that they deserve to be abused and I don't, right? And the fun part, especially for me, is I'm not even seeing this as child abuse yet, especially in the beginning. Like, later on, I'm able to form, I don't know. I know that this is wrong. I don't drink the Kool-Aid at any point in my experience. I know it's wrong. I've read a lot of books that use this weird jazz, and it's horrifying to me, and I can't believe it's happening. And I'm sure that if a sane human being of a power of authority would just walk in unannounced, that they would also agree that a lot of this is completely unacceptable. But the day-to-day, especially the school stuff, and when the top family, like, table topics or the house topics aren't about you, and if you have a slow introduction into, like, the severity of the sanctions, I don't know. And then also, I think for me too, just like coming from my home experience, this was a lot, and the books I'd read, this was a lot easier for me to accept. It was hard for me to accept that it was really happening, that it was really happening to me, and that it was really happening in America. But once I got over that initial shock, I knew what kind of demon I was facing, right? And so, I don't know. I was highly adaptive. I was highly adaptive as a survival skill, and this is the most adaptive that this is my peak. This is my climax. The family school is totally my climax. I learn and learn to use the skills I've already learned, to survive to an extent where, I genuinely, with a lot of the people that I've met in life, I think a majority of people put in this situation, especially as adults, if they were adults, would become suicidal, or run away, or freak out and wind up in prison, or whatever the case may be, because it is genuinely, like, it just breaks your brain. It just totally breaks your brain. Depending, but if you were to come from an extremely violent, and an extremely emotionally and verbally, mentally abusive world anyways, there are certain aspects of it where you're like, oh, I know this beast, and, this is how we're going to rock it. So there's that. But also, the kids that were the bad kids, I don't know if they really were either. I know that there were a lot of, when they would tell us their story, which is, the kind of thing I'm trying to do now, but, really sucking at it. Some of these kids had killed people. Most of the ones who'd killed people, it was accidental. It was drunk driving or drug related, and they were victims themselves. Like, these kids were suffering PTSD as a result of being and holding themselves responsible and being held responsible regularly as killers, as murderers. And they're just kids. And see, this is the important thing if you value science at all, is that this kind of stressor, this prolonged exposure to stress hormones that you cannot fight or flight, fawn or faint from, it creates brain damage. And beyond all of these coping skills which no longer serve us, and my therapist wants me to be grateful that the coping skills kept me alive thus far, but right now they're ruining my fucking life. These things only go so far, and in a lot of cases, I think that the best case scenario you're going to get is like a repressed processing of what you went through. But even those kids that were, drug dealing hoodlums, they had stories that made it make sense. When you look at it from a trauma-informed perspective, most of these kids are coming from either broken homes or homes where they have a narcissist parent that's abusing them on some level. And so, it all makes sense. I don't understand how none of this makes sense. And that's why I think when you look at these kinds of programs as a viable option currently, pretend that they don't have the child abuse mentality there. Does it still even work, aside from the possibility to remove a child from an unsafe situation like I had when I went to Paul's? Now, if there were ways that kids could go off to genuine therapeutic boarding homes where they're trauma informed and they're treating the child as someone who's gone through trauma, and it's compassionate response instead of, hostile attack therapy, then I'm not sure that just fundamentally they work, because you're isolating this child, and you're treating them as the problem when they're fucking not. Like, very rarely are they. And also, if they are a sociopath or a narcissist or anything on that, like, personality, attitude disorder jazz, this kind of program is not going to fucking work for them anyways. Like, it's just going to teach them how to manipulate on a far superior scale, and it's going to give them an entire population of people to practice on. There were anchors. Anchor is like, I think Meredith called them RAs. Maybe that's what they're called. I really haven't had a lot of how did things work and what were things called conversations with people in the past 15 years or in the past couple years, where it's been my main focus in my healing journey. Mostly my conversations have been about how we're doing now, how the school affected us. And, I remember this with you and it broke my heart, or thank you so much. Like that's what those conversations are. My view of a lot of the psychology jazz is I've always been super anti anything where it's childhood blaming, because I'm super high vigilance on my own personal responsibility, which comes from being raised Catholic, but it also comes from the family school, especially with taking your inventory. I still take my personal inventory. That is a tool that if I could learn to use it correctly instead of against myself, was very beneficial, that I learned from AA and from the family school. But unfortunately, the way I was taught to use it was a really negative way, which it's counterintuitive, because instead of just being able to be open and honest about my failings and shortcomings and where I thought or did wrong in my day, I'm not choosing better or becoming better, because I'm just getting stuck in the blame cycle of it. And so I'm not thinking or feeling my way to better solutions. So, and that's the thing too. It's like there's a lot of people from these programs who'll be like, I learned some really epic skills, and that's fucking true, you guys. Like, there are some skills and some good ideas to be taken from pretty much every cult that's ever existed. Fight me on it, right? The problem is that most of the time, I'm not a Sith, I'm not going to deal in absolutes here, but most of the time, I do think those, because they're coming from the wrong intention and they're being perverted, they become their opposites. They become psychologically damaging instead of, a psychological tool that someone can use effectively to better their lives. And so that's kind of something that we're dealing with in these programs. But the narratives of identity for yourself and others is really a big thing. I don't even know how they came about, because as far as kids from other families, a lot of times, and especially for the first couple months while you're on a 6-month blackout anyways, you don't really have much contact with them. But still, I remember narratives being constructed for members of other families, including one who has been one of the, thank you. I don't even know what words to use, but thank you for advocating for all of us and being a part of shutting down our school and bringing everything forward in a public light. And he's built a beautiful life for himself, not too far from me, has a beautiful woman in his life who loves and supports him and has walked this journey with him to heal. And they advocate for and help others continue their healing and get access to those resources. He's a beautiful, beautiful freaking person. And my perspective of him, before this narrative was told to me, was that he seemed like a really sweet, shy, nice kid. I never, ever spoke a word to this kid. But he actually is like a main character in my story, because I always saw him, because he was on exile so often, that he was in the hallway that our family shared, or when I was on work sanction, we were on work sanction together, all of these things. And for whatever reason, this kid, this quiet, pensive, introverted kid, was on my radar. And then over the course of the first few months that I was there, the narrative of him of being a pervert and a psychopath came across, and it worked. I'm not saying I believed that about him. I'm just saying that you would question it. Most people did believe these things that were told about each other, but it does feed into your perspective of a person that you especially cannot speak to. So you kind of have like this silent mime-like relationship coexisting with some other people, and then everything you hear about them is the social narrative that they're spreading amongst the entire family school, so that everyone can participate in whatever this victim shaming is, if she was sexually assaulted by a family member because she's a slut and wanted it, and so we're all going to participate in, treating her like a slut, or if, he's a virgin pervert, maybe because he admitted he'd masturbated, so now he's a virgin pervert, and all the girls are, vibe-wise, and this is something cool I learned from the family school, is like how much of a relationship and an interaction people can have without speaking, because a lot of my most significant experiences with other people, there are no words. Like, if I were to write it out in movie format, which we've done, a few times, and stuff we're still working on, but some of these really powerful scenes, there are freaking no words, because everybody's on blackout with each other. But you still have these very intimate understandings and coexistings and, almost alliances, these nonverbal alliances of mutual support. But also you have people being emotionally and mentally group shamed and blamed and ostracized. And so there's that too. And that's a big thing of what will blow your mind. I don't think that we can get those across in these podcasts. We can tell you all the things they made us do or they did to us. And at most of our schools, most of us can agree that certain things were child abuse. And so we're like, oh, that needs to be stopped. But for the psychological jazz, I'm not sure if we can get it across. So now I touched on this in the first episode with Meredith, because Meredith was on Exile, and Exile for me was the most horrific sanction psychologically, and maybe you guys can understand it when I verbally express it, but I think that when you watch things like The Handmaid's Tale, or you read certain dystopic books, you can understand it better, because it's different. You know, this is a testimonial concept, is like, this happened to me, and you can't relate, and it either seems horrific or it doesn't, right? But when you see it acted out, or you read it in your own head and you create that stage, I think it takes on a whole new presence, because this is first person. But, so, let me just try. So, you're a teenager, you're a kid, we're going to call them children because they are, and you've been cast out of your home, and you've been put in this environment where everyone is calling you, adults and children, a slut, because of the sexual assault that you suffered, because, again, you are a child, and we're not talking about you humping in cars with your boyfriend like I was, right? We're talking about you didn't approve of the sexual contact that happened anyways, and now you are slut-shamed collectively by your entire world, which is a few hundred people in the Catskill Mountains. You don't want to accept this. You're fighting back. You're defending yourself. You're refusing to accept this reality. You're refusing to stand up there and be like, you're right, I'm a dirty, worthless slut. Nobody loves me. I'm powerless. I need to surrender. And if you don't do that, you can get put on exile. And so now everyone goes from calling you up in front of 30 people at a time to literally call you a slut, yell, point, spit in your face. They've gone beyond putting you in a corner. Again, you're a teenager now, so being put in a corner in the middle of the room with 30-something odd other kids who are allowed to come up to you if they're a senior member and talk shit to you while you sit in the corner to try to get you to break through on some level. They've gone from putting you on poverty, taking away your shoes. A lot of times this is standing in quarter all day in all the rooms that you're in. They've gone beyond putting you on work sanction, which means denying you access to education. And work sanction is not helpful. Work sanction, we're not accomplishing anything. They're having you shovel snow from one field to another in a blizzard just so that you can understand and accept your powerlessness over your circumstances and have a breakthrough breakdown and first step, it's just mostly menial jazz, but also obviously you are doing the real stuff like kitchen prep, you're doing all that jazz as well, cleaning everything, but most of the family cleaning in those buildings and in the dorms are shared, so that's not on the work sanction, kids, right? But they've gone beyond this, and, maybe you were just on, house family blackout. No one could speak to you except for senior members of your own family. And now you're on exile. And I witnessed people be on exile multiple people on exile, during my stay, and some of them longer than weeks. I believe one of the females that specifically impacted me, because of course witness syndrome, I'm a selfish little bitch and it's all about me, because I can't accept the stuff about me, so I'm going to live vicariously through everybody's stories, but I'm also like writer narrative person, so isn't that kind of just who I am? I don't know. Okay, but anyways, she impacted me, like I talk about her in therapy, and so she was put on exile, and watching her walk through the halls of this school alone in a palpable bubble of solitude was like it was awesome, but awful. It was so much awe that it was awful. It was profound. It's something I've, written about in my mind and on paper a million times since. I have no idea what it was like from her perspective, but just wondering that and experiencing her experience from the outside world was enough. And she was a good person. I really liked this person. She was joyous and warm and open, and just a beautiful light. And that's usually who got targeted, you guys, were the people who were able to do that. I think from a perspective of they didn't want the others to think you could just get through it, that they needed everyone to see everyone break. It was required participation. And it was just, it's inhumane. It was inhumane. The science shows us that isolation is psychologically destructive. And we know that children, teenagers especially, their prefrontal cortex and other parts of their brain aren't fully developed yet. And so this kind of brain damage and excessive access to stress hormones through prolonged periods and a lack of access to hormones that would be otherwise beneficial, it's just permanently destructive. And it was horrific to watch this happen. And, on my selfish, you go through your own experience as a witness level, it was horrific for me because I wasn't capable and I wasn't going to do anything. I wasn't going to risk being mandated to this school into my 20s by trying to help this other girl. But all I wanted to do was help this other girl. Bystander syndrome for someone like me, or maybe just me, I know there's others of you out there, there has to be, is the most detrimental thing for my self-image, my self-esteem, my self-confidence, because, don't we all want to be the hero in our own story? And so to stand by while other people are really, and I mean this, brutalized, and everybody else is letting it happen, it blows your fucking mind. You watch hundreds of people pull a girl or whoever into the middle of the gymnasium and everyone stands around, and house topics, unlike family topics, are they're so much more brutal and savage. And so if you didn't listen to the first episode to properly frame a topic, during all of your meals, 3 meals a day, you got 3 meals a day, maybe half portions, maybe a frozen soy burger, but you still got 3 meals a day. If you chose to eat them. And there were table topics during these meals in your family with your 30 kids and 10 odd adults, and you would call up different members of your family to either inform them that they are moving forward in their program, that they're visiting home, that they're graduating soon, these are the good ones, or that someone is calling them up for some negative behavior or they're, getting put on a new sanction. This is how you would get off a sanction too, would be at a table topic, although this would be fairly quick. And so you would have maybe 2 or 3 of them per meal, or if it was your lucky day, you'd be the table topic for the entire meal. That just depended. And so house topics were the entire house. So it was all the families together. They were, in my experience, I remember them only being in the gymnasium. It's probably the only place that we could all fit. They would have like a brief announcement topic-y thing, maybe a roundup before meals, where we would all stand together in the hallways of the school before going back to our families, but that wasn't a house topic. And a house topic usually resulted in someone being thrown in isolation, or being pulled out of isolation to be given an opportunity to get out of isolation. In my experience, that didn't happen. And each of your families usually had a couple really aggressive big guys, the big scary guys. Usually, they were the drug addicts instead of the alcoholics. They were still usually single, although maybe not. In my family, Angelo was our bulldog. He was a biker with a drug addiction. And he was the guy who got red, went pit bull, and spit in your face yelling, not spit in your face, but spit in your face while he was yelling. I'm not trying to put shit on him that I didn't see, y'all. So we had Angelo, and then our female was Cindy, and we mentioned her, Cindy Argyros, the wife of the guy who ran the school, in the first episode as well. And she was tiny, a tiny little, I don't think real redhead, and she just had like those wild bug eyes that were just like always on, like, if Brendan Fraser had been shot up with like everything, and she was like a Chihuahua energy. And so for someone like me, neither Angelo nor Cindy was particularly threatening, because I'd been dealing with, my big, scary Vietnam vet, PTSD daddy, in the middle of the night my whole life. And then Chihuahua bitches, like, they didn't have an effect on me, because all I saw there was a lack of control and a projection of their own lack of power. That is how I took that. So those ones didn't work on me. And so for people like me, sometimes they would have us visit with, or have members of other families try it out on us, that came from a different perspective, and see what worked. And in house topics, all of a sudden now you have all the pit bulls and all the chihuahuas from all the families are present. And so this gives that kid the opportunity to experience attack therapy from members of other families. And it happens in front of everyone in the school, because a house topic, for me, I really feel like was less about actually getting that kid to surrender to whatever was happening, as opposed to just making a statement to the other kids that this is what will happen to you if you do the same thing. And this is also how you figured out, like, who is really targeted in other families, if you didn't already know, because they were in your families or they were on exile or whatever in your hallways or in your classes. This is how you'd figure it out. And yeah, so house topics were pretty horrifying, and they also sometimes would be when someone was returning from having run away, and then, everyone berates them, yells in their face, throws them in isolation, and informs them they'll be on exile and work sanction or whatever, and, for how, until further notice, because sanctions are always usually until further notice, unless it's one of the standard, you're on 6-month blackout for this amount of time or until, we review it. And yeah. House topics also happen in, like I said, in the gym, which is also where the isolation room is. So, and again, this is something I'm not sure we can verbally get across, but one of my favorite parts, and this was a brain shaker for me the first time it happened, is when everybody gathers like the big mob, and then they open the isolation door, and like I said, when they drag someone out of isolation, give them the opportunity to go back in. But just looking around this room at everyone who's so like freaking amped up and also so fucking relieved it's not them. And then there's usually 3 or 4 peers who are testifying to why this person blah blah blah, which is, permission for them to pretty much act like the adult staff, the senior members of your families. That's what it was, but it also allowed them to like get in your face, yell at you, berate you, tell you what's wrong with you, and that's what they're supposed to do, right? And the more that they lay on you, the more obvious it is to staff that these students like are getting with the program, that they're able to pick up all this. In the isolation room, if you don't understand the effects of isolation, they are against the law here in the United States of America. We do not isolate adults. So if you consider that these children's brains aren't fully developed, obviously isolating them is probably not a great idea. And I think there were 2 isolation rooms side by side, although I only ever really dealt with the one on the left, so maybe there is really only one. I'll have to ask Miranda. And they had these big red metal doors with this tiny, maybe it was a square-shaped foot, like maybe like 12 inches by 12 inches, glass peephole thing, so that you could look into the isolation room, because the isolation room, those kids were in there 24/7 for as long as they were in there. And I witnessed children in there upwards of multiple weeks. They used, I think they also had, Meredith talked about like a quiet room. There might have been a quiet room too. I don't even know where the hell that was, right? You knew where isolation was because it's in your freaking gym, and so there's that. It's there, and the kids staff it. So you have to have, I think it was usually 2 kids. One had to be a senior sponsor, like a senior level student, watching isolation room at all times. So they would be like swapping out on shifts and study halling or reading like the big book or doing whatever they needed to do, working on their program, doing their 4th step, whatever, sitting outside that locked metal door. And then they would need to, if they needed to look in, obviously check on it, if they needed to report anything. I mean, it wasn't the biggest school in the world. If you just went yelling through the halls, everyone's going to notice, because that's kind of a normal thing that happens, and we have to be aware. And people would, so the room, I don't know, it was a square cement room, and it had brown, like the utility carpet, stapled or nailed or whatever to the floor and to the wall. So they have this carpet around the floor and the wall in this cement room, and you usually did not get out of that room to defecate. I do think that I don't know if anybody was able to, because I guess they could have the kids walk you to the bathroom. You could get like an adult supervisor to go with you to the bathroom, which was down that hall. But all the people that I knew, like, I only watched Isolation, I feel like, one time because my junior sponsor was watching Isolation, so I had to be there with her. And in the entire time we were there, we did not let her out for a bathroom break. She asked to use the bathroom. They were not letting her out. And you could see the effects that Isolation had, because, I mean, you're in school with these kids, so, like, whether or not you have any sort of one-on-one relationship, or they're in your family or not, you know, like, you get the vibe of someone, right? Well, the vibe of someone in isolation for a few days, peeing on themselves, or, oh God, a few weeks, like, their souls are kind of drained out dead. They disassociate. It is brutal. And some people, like, never totally come back. And when they do, it's a permanent change. It's the same thing as when people came back frostbitten, after running away in, you know, the winter, or came back after being sexually assaulted after running away, or beaten up, or going to jail for a little while before they came back. Or, I mean, they're like, it's very obvious changes. So Isolation, for me, it wasn't too scary of a thing. You know, that arrogance that we talk of, I did think I would prefer to be in isolation than dealing with the psychological warfare I was dealing with my peers and these totally unbalanced adults who didn't know me and, you know, were trying to, like, manipulate my reality and, like, throw me into a psychological breakdown. But seeing the effects of isolation firsthand, it's just irreversible damage, and it's really not worth the risk. And I do believe that everyone that I saw in isolation suffered permanent damage from that experience. None of them ever came out the way they went in, and that's just the reality of the situation. Now, I, in typical fashion, after I realized I wasn't going to be able to get access to CPS or any sort of authority, you know, took to my, you know, like, Irish rebel tactics, right? So I wasn't planning on going on a hunger strike, but I do not eat tuna fish. So I don't eat tuna fish, not because I'm better than tuna fish, or even that I was born with this extreme dislike. In fact, my mother used to make me tuna fish sandwiches with raisins on cinnamon raisin bread when I was young, and I loved it. And, of course, I gorged upon it and, you know, thus created, like, an aversion to it, to the extent that it's only been a few years that I stopped, like, vomiting, if, God forbid, I smelt it. You know, I'm really dramatic, so there's shit like that. So one day for lunch, our lunch is a ice cream scooper or two. I'm not really sure. I think I got half portions, I don't know, of tuna fish just directly on a piece of lettuce. I'm smoking a cigarette for this because it's traumatic, you guys. They wanted me to eat the tuna fish, and I was like, no. Let us talk about the child abuse in this. So I didn't want to eat the fucking tuna, so I didn't eat the tuna, and turns out family school rule is what you don't eat, you will eat at your next meal, and this went on for days. I didn't eat anything for frickin' days. Oh my God, I remember the vitamins now! Oh my God. Okay, anyways, so I eventually get to the point on my hunger strike where I am incredibly weak. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm on work sanction at this time because I just would have, like, died, you know, a couple days in. And I remember, and see, here's the fun part about these kind of memories, which, if anybody has CPTSD or, you know, went through these experiences can relate to, I expect that some of my memories are so ingrained and so bright and vivid, full of all these somatic sights, smells, sounds. I can feel like I'm in the room. I can almost have a flashback, and if I were, like, super high, I would, right? some of those memories are like that. I am behind my eyes, peering out in the moment. The way I see time is it's simultaneous. It's a human construct anyways. And so there's a huge fear about those moments because I don't want to like pop into the consciousness reality of then and get stuck there again for reality. Can you understand how horrifying it is to believe what I believe about time and consciousness and then have these like, woof, you guys, the fear of waking up in that bunk, and I still have the nightmares to this day, but even if I didn't have actual nightmares of it, the fear of my consciousness getting stuck back there with the part of my consciousness that is fucking stuck back there for eternity. Like, dude, this is why if I didn't have a kid or a dog, I'd be dead now. Like, I really would, because I just am not willing to risk that. I don't know what we were talking about. Oh, Tuna. So the child abuse known as Tuna. So I am on the floor of our locker room thing that we all share, and it's like the, you know, blue linoleum shit, and it's cold, and I'm cold, and I just don't have any energy left. Like, my body is, I've been drinking water, you know what I mean? I think I've been taking my vitamin, but my body is done. It wasn't made to go this many days without food, and all it would have been was some bullshit tuna anyway, so it's not like it would have even filled me up, and I just cannot life, and we need to go to class, and I'm on the floor of the locker room, and my psychological state is such that this is a Miranda meltdown we are having. Don't know if I'm crying. I think I'm being more like, you know, totally disassociated, staring out into space, like refusing to respond to people. I can probably hear them, but like, let's just pretend I can't, because here's where I'm at now. So where I'm at now is like, dude, if I like need to go to a hospital, my human rights like come into play again. And I remember, like, I've already gone through like legit Yale training for Amnesty International as a student rep, being trained to be the state rep. So I know what my fucking human rights are. And I know if I get to a public hospital that I get access to the police and CPS. Like, I don't know how the laws are in New York, but I'm pretty sure that's the case here too. So this is my goal. Like, and also, like, remember, because I didn't tell you, but you should fucking remember, because I told you I was Irish. I'm already all about Bobby Sands, okay? Like, H Block, I've read all about that. I've read about other, you know, starvation strikes. Again, I was highly involved with Amnesty International as a youth. Like, these are the choices I'm making as a teenager because I give a shit about that shit. So I am now not only just refusing to subject myself to tuna fish, but I am also trying to escape this prison in hope to get access to anything that will change my circumstance or give me contact with the outside world. Because to this point, and I think we're at least a month into the family school or something when this happens, it's not the first week, I have had zero contact with the outside world of any kind. I've had zero contact with my parents. Obviously, I'm not going to have any contact with Cindy. She's not my mom, right? Even though she actually had a guardianship that was given to her by my parents prior to me going there. Obviously, I have no contact with my boyfriend or my friends. Come on, you guys. And I have nobody else in my family that would be looking for or advocating for me. Remember, my aunt left me years ago. So no contact. And so this starvation strike is my only way out. And I am putting everything into it. I don't believe that I'm going to fucking die from, like, you know, passing out or even having, like, my stupid fucking damaged liver fail on me. I'm pretty sure they will be, like, required to transfer me to a hospital. I'm pretty sure an ambulance is going to come and get me. I made my point, right? So I don't know if I'd verbalize this point. I fucking hope I hadn't, but, you know, again, with my arrogance, perhaps I had. Perhaps I told my sponsor in, you know, like, my sanctimonious martyrdom of nutrition that I was on my way to liberation through the hospital system. Maybe I'd done that. I don't know. We'll have to ask her. But either way, Cindy fucking Argyros, who actually, Cindy, I think, was my temporary sponsor before Tina was finally fully my sponsor. So maybe she's my sponsor at this time, or this is right after it's been handed over. Marches into the locker room and gets in my face with her bug eyes and informs me that my master plan is not going to work because they're getting an IV ready, and they're just going to give me an IV here and keep doing that until I eat food, and I'm not going to die. Like, it's fine. Like, that's total. They've talked to my parents. My parents already know what I'm doing, and it's, of course, it's typical of me to, like, have a starvation strike, and my bullshit manipulations aren't going to work, and I'm such a bitch baby, you guys. Oh, my world just came crashing down, you know, like, I'd committed every bit of mental energy and physical strength to this plan, and I believed that it was over. Now, I'm 33 now, and at 33 now, fuck you, bitch, I'm gonna call your bluff, right? I think she threw in getting mandated for this, you know, and I think that I just psychologically, and I fast now in life, right? And so I've gotten to points where I've pushed myself where I'm just not, you know, cognitively functioning at my finest because I'm starving, right? So I'm sure that was in play, and I was 17, and I'm just really trying not to blame myself for not calling her on her bluff and getting out faster. But I don't even know if my plan would have worked, right? So, like, what if I had gotten to the hospital, and maybe it was in Hancock or Binghamton where the police were bought by the school, which they really were, because they're the, like, Delaware police, county police or whatever, were always bringing the kids back, no matter what they told them. So maybe it wouldn't have worked, and then maybe that would have psychologically broken me sooner, and when I had gone back to the school psychologically broken, maybe I would have drank the Kool-Aid, and then maybe I would have stayed, and maybe I'd be broken on some other level now. So, you know, it all works out the way it's supposed to. All the keychain slogans are probably true. But I gave in, and I ate the tuna and my vomit, and we moved forward in that experience. You know, up until this too, I wasn't eating. I'd never eaten, other than maybe it's possible that I'd had fast food bacon before, but at home I always had turkey bacon. But, like, I didn't eat pork, and when I got there, I told them I was a vegetarian, and they told me no, I wasn't. So I had long given in for the meat thing, the tuna and the gagging and the eating my vomit while everybody mocked me, and I'm such a bitch baby. That's not trauma, y'all, but it was for me. It was. And it didn't have anything to do with the tuna. Woo, let's take a breather. So, heads up, I did finish this, what was supposed to be one episode, but it turns out I literally sat in my car chain smoking cigarettes, an entire pack, mind you, drinking 2 coffees, and I guess therapeutically recording all day long. So, this whole story is almost 4 hours, and so, I am gonna clip it here. If you want to just, start up, the next episode because you actually want to spend that much time hearing about my shit, then, by all means, start the next half of this episode is going to pick up on table topics and my topics. We're going to go into sanctions. We are going to touch on some pretty intense abuse and even a death at the school. And then the next episode is going to cover, what happened after the school, what I used for healing, and what you can reach out for as resources if you're kind of in a similar situation, if you're in the survivors of institutional abuse boat. Would have preferred to have clipped this episode at a funny point, but fuck it. I feel like after, my little tuna episode, we all might need a beer. Is it not funny to make a beer joke in kind of like a parody Alcoholics Anonymous story? Is it not okay? Let me know. Okay. All right. Well, I will see you either in a moment when you click play on part 2, or, in 10 years when you decide maybe you want to deal with this shit again. I do not blame you. Samesies. Talk to you guys later on Troubled. Bye.